I'm going to kick off with a quick check-in. I'm going to put you to 3 today, and you'll have 6 minutes between the 3 of you. So it's about 2 minutes each. It could be everybody taking turns to check in, or it could be a conversation. Hey, Rob, good to see you back. So let me do that. All right, there will be one room with 2 people. The rest will be 3. And I may add some people to rooms as some people log on late. So invitation on your screen, please accept. I'll see you back in 6 minutes. A general check-in of how you're doing, how was your week, and what you might have noticed around the archetypes. See you back in 6.
I find I'm asking more questions, not just tapping and repeating what they're saying, but actually asking questions, about how they feel.
Welcome back, everybody. So I'd like to hear from a few of you what happened in your check-ins, what happened in your week, anything archetype related, any ahas, what's going on?
Okay, I'll go. I saw this week that my warrior is dead on the ground, not just inflated, but just dead on the ground is what I saw.
What does that mean, Jane, dead on the ground?
Just in my ability to take action.
Are you saying it's strong in your ability to take action?
No,
okay.
Weak.
So deflated.
Yeah. Deflated,
Got
yes.
Got
As in D for dead.
Yes.
On the ground.
Okay, got it. Bless her. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll go.
Rob.
Hi. So I'm aware that I've been out of the journey a bit. I mean, it's been there in my mind. This time of year is extremely busy for me. I do catering at festivals, and so that's why the timings haven't always worked. But I wanted to be part of this, so that's why I signed up, and it's working today right now. And so I was reflecting on how the archetypes are for me when I'm doing a show. So I'm doing an event, a festival, and I'd say they're all pretty present. So the magician's there, and I've got to know all of the different things that have to be done, and there's a lot of different things. The sovereign's there, seeing the grander picture of how it's all going to come together and giving instruction to others. The lover's there, connecting with the staff and connecting with the customers, and the warrior's there doing it and getting a lot done. And then at the end of it, I'm exhausted. So I'm reflecting that the warrior is inflated, that I'm using too much warrior, and then it's completely deflated. And so what I think would serve me better would to use more sovereign in instructing others, basically, to do more and me do less.
And so perhaps another way of saying that is to empower others or to delegate to others, right?
Yeah, they're the words.
And I know that's what you mean. I'm just kind of wordsmithing it a bit because that's more like a sovereign energy as opposed to telling people what to do. Beautiful, Ron. Thanks.
Empowering, yes, thank you.
Anyone else?
So,
yes, I shared in... Sorry, someone else talking.
Go ahead, Megan.
I'm going
no, Robin.
to listen to Benny's advice and keep talking. Hang on there. Even though it's hard. Yeah, something happened with a very good friend, and I shared a bit in the group kind of thing. We've known each other for 30 years, and she has, when she gets stressed, she tends to dump on me and make me wrong kind of thing. And I always have noticed I get angry. And this time I was like, oh, I can feel the anger coming up. And I was like, oh, that's warrior kind of thing. And I was like, interesting. What does the warrior need? And I was like, boundaries. So I said to, actually, I prefer that you actually told me what you wanted rather than telling me what I'd done wrong. And she was like, okay. And told me what she needed. And I went, okay, fine, I'll do that. And then she apologized as well.
Megan, that is awesome. Holy moly. That's like
great.
Fabulous. In the moment, tweaking the things, getting a different result, and probably feeling better about it.
Had a quick look at the manual as well, just to double check I knew what I was doing.
Very sweet. Thank you for that. Somebody else was started talking same time as Megan. Who was that?
Benny, I had to go to a psychiatric ward to see somebody and to work with somebody, and yeah, it was immensely hard for me, and it was like not a deflated sovereign, it's like a deflated sovereign. And try to use the affirmation and get something valuable in you. But yes, it's hard, just being there in the environment. I was exhausted, I felt like I need medication after that.
So perhaps to you, that could be a clue for you that you have some sovereign work to do for yourself. I mean, it could be, right? To bring more balance into your own sovereign. So that in addition to the example Megan gave, where in the moment she was able to just apply it and tweak things, let us also use the times where we are not able to do that. In the moment, the anger just takes over, or the sovereign becomes deflated as a clue or a sign for, okay, so I've got some work to do here. Book a session with somebody that's been on these calls, or swap sessions or do whatever, because they know what you're talking about, and say, hey, today I'd like to do some sovereign work. And then you let the practitioner figure out what they're going to do with you. That might be useful, so that we can become more accustomed to the balanced archetype, so it's easier for us to draw on them in the moment when we need to.
I prefer clients outside of the ward, Bennie.
I mean, that would make a lot of sense. I think being in such an environment would affect me too. It's
and I just think there's a sort of professional skill set also necessary. That I really, thought that's so needed there, and I was so thankful for her to be there, at that stage.
All right, thank you, Tio. What amazes me about this stuff is that I've been doing this for, I don't know, probably more than 10 years. Yeah, it's way more than 10 years. The archetype, specifically working with these 4 archetypes, and still it gets deeper. You all know I'm spending most of my time sitting on my balcony, and suddenly these deeper realizations happen about the archetype. So there's 3 things that came up for me in the week that I want to share with you. They're not in the manual, so you might want to make some notes or just remember them. I was thinking about body parts that would relate to these archetypes. If you had to take a guess, which body part do you think we might relate to the lover? The heart. Okay, I see some of you. That's kind of an obvious one, right? That's our desire to connect, and we connect through our emotions. Doesn't matter what else we tell ourselves, we do connect as human beings. We connect through emotion. So the heart is an obvious one. What about the magician? The head, right? The mind, absolutely. Trying to figure things out, all that stuff. What about the warrior?
The liver.
So Liesel's got her fists up. Okay, so that might be an inflated warrior. Rob, what did you do? The hands, right? Yeah. Who said the liver?
I did, Sharon.
Say more, Sharon.
Because the liver's associated emotionally with courage.
Ah, okay, good. I didn't even know that. So for me,
and also,
I would say solar plexus as well.
Solar plexus, Emmy, say more.
It's the power center of the body, the chakra that is most closely related to your personal power, your integrity, standing strong in your own power.
Cool. Thank you both for that. I just picked the hands because for me, that's like the doing part, right? We've got to get up and get our hands dirty and do stuff. Anybody else trying to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say your spine, because it's your inner scaffolding.
I like that.
And
perhaps it'll be the spine and something else, because remember, with a warrior we associate with action, taking action in the world, getting out of bed even if you don't feel like it, feeding the kids even though you'd rather put them out on the streets, actually doing stuff as opposed to just being. And then
I sort of think of the legs and the feet, Bennie.
Okay, yeah,
like standing your ground,
Perfect.
Standing in your ground.
So notice also that there are these different ways of feeling it, and you'll know the one that feels best for you. So perhaps, Avenol, in your case, and this might be for everybody, if in Avenol's case it's the feet and the legs, perhaps what might you in the moment access it is to stamp your feet or rub your legs or do something with that physiologically which might make it easier to access emotionally that particular archetype. Perhaps for the lovers, or to access more lover energy, it might be breathing into the heart, putting hands on the heart, visualizing the heart blossoming like a flower. You know, whatever body part is associated for you, see what happens when you physiologically stimulate it, or in your imagination, as it might help you access the archetype. And then what about the sovereign?
For me, the sovereign's like full body presence.
Okay, full body presence for Carol. Anyone else?
Something to do with the breath.
I'd say the womb.
The womb, the breath. Oh, I like this. Anyone else?
Shoulders and neck.
Shoulders and neck for you. So for me, what came up was the crown. Like actually the physical crown, because there's also the association, you know, with the sovereign wearing a crown. And again, there's no right and wrong. This is just floating some thoughts that hopefully might help you connect the stuff with your body, because ultimately that's where we feel our feelings. And that's the way we're going to access the archetypes.
I love what you just said, Benny, because for me, there's a strong spiritual element with the sovereign. And the crown is where you connect to source, to the divine, your soul, whatever, too. So,
cool.
Because it's the bigger picture.
So if any of these didn't resonate, perhaps spend some time over the next week or so and find out which body part resonates most with you, and see what happens when you give those parts love or conscious attention. See, you know, you might even ask that body part a question. So when you are really unsure of what to do, you might actually ask whatever. So the mind, so the magician, asks that, like, what's my next step? What's required here? Or put your hand on your heart and ask for a question, or ask a question. What do I need to do here to connect with this person more, or to connect with myself, and so on. The other thing that I just wanted to illustrate is how these archetypes work so closely together. So I have two examples here. Let's say, for example, that you live with someone and it's time to draw some boundaries. They keep leaving dirty dishes, they keep eating your food, they keep doing whatever they do, play loud music at night. And it's like, no, hold on. This is not okay, and I need to draw some boundaries. And perhaps if you're really angry, you're ready to go into that conversation completely charged and angry and tell them, listen, this is bullshit and it's not okay and you shouldn't do this and whatever. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the chance of actually having a connection with that person after that conversation is fairly remote, right? Because most of us are going to react to being spoken to in that way. Because in that way, we stop seeing the person as a person. So the sovereign might say, whoa, 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 whoa. I get, warrior, that you are really inflated now and really upset about what's going on. And since I would like to have a connection with my flatmate, since we do share the same space, how about we introduce some lover into that conversation? Just to temper or moderate the warrior. So there might be words of kindness. There might even be words of appreciation. Listen, I love this and this and this. The thing is, I'd like to talk to you about this and this and this, so that it is still a firm conversation. It's not a request. It's like, this is how it is. These are the boundaries that you need to adhere to, but done in a kinder way. Does that make sense? That the sovereign would say, well, hold on, because the sovereign has the bigger picture, as Rob said earlier in his check-in. And the bigger picture is ultimately that we want to be connected to other people. I think that's just kind of an innate part of all of us. Some of us are not necessarily connected with that part, but it's still there. I think it's part of the human journey. Another example is, let's say you have to give somebody bad news and you are totally in your magician. And you are about to deliver this news as if you are talking about the weather. It's cold, it's clinical, it's factual. This could be a diagnosis for a serious disease, or it could be anything, death of a loved one. And it could be significantly serious news to convey. In that moment, the sovereign might go, okay, the information is great, magician. Thank you for having this conversation. This person is probably going to be in some pain after they've heard the news. How about we step into the lover a little bit more? We slow down the way we speak. we introduce a lot of kindness and sadness. Not sadness. We need to introduce a lot of kindness and gentleness. We might choose, since the lover is also about the body, we might choose to hold their hand as we tell them the news. You kind of get the idea? It's not about what you do, it's about putting on the archetype that will moderate the initial response so that there's better chance of a connection afterwards. So just that mindfulness of how the archetypes can play and do play together when the sovereign is balanced and can see that we need some more spice in this mix. And then just a quick one on the sovereign. I'm not sure if we have spoken about this because I'm not sure that I've ever looked at it this way. I think for me, what also lives in the sovereign is surrender and acceptance. Now, let me be very clear. There is a big difference between surrendering and abdicating. I'm not talking about an abdicating sovereign. Abdicating sovereign says, okay, fine, I'm out of here. You guys figure it out. So that is very different to surrendering. Surrendering might be, okay, let's take it back to the old days of wars. So the enemy have declared a war and the sovereign finds out about it. The sovereign, the balanced sovereign, is not going to jump up and down and scream and shout and swear and get all uppity up about the war coming. The balanced sovereign is going to say, okay, it's not what I would have chosen for my people, but since the war is coming, let's do this. Let's engage into negotiations. Let's do this. Let's prepare for war, whatever the case might be. So accepting what is also does not mean that I don't do anything about it, because that's abdicating. I can surrender to what is and accept what is and still take action to change it. And for me, that lives in the sovereign quarter, sovereign archetype. I think there is Jane mentioned the word spiritual. I think there is also for the balanced sovereign, perhaps, and depending on your belief systems, please just disregard what I say or take it on board, like a real knowing that everything is happening according to plan. Everything is unfolding perfectly the way it is. And it doesn't mean I can just sit on the couch every day, shrugging my shoulders, going, well, everything's perfect, Benny said. It still requires me to take action in the world to change what needs to be changed, what needs to be blessed. But ultimately, I think there's more of it's a much easier way of living, accepting what is, as opposed to resisting what is. That's all I'm suggesting there. Any comments on those three things that we just spoke of? Comments, observations, disagreements? No?
And Benny, I would like to ask how the magician and the sovereign work together, because the sovereign's got the bigger picture and the magician's got has the magician got the plan of action, or can see things and see how it needs to work out, or how does that interplay work?
So the magician is the one that'll come up with the plan. The plan will then be passed to the warrior to execute the plan, right? The sovereign will make sure that that plan actually works. So the sovereign would go, thank you, inflated magician, for working out a plan to eradicate half of the population of the planet. However, that's not a particularly loving thing to do. So let's bring some lover energy. Let's moderate your plan and come up with a different plan. So for me, again, the sovereign would be on a good day, the sovereign is the one overseeing all these archetypes and lovingly and kindly and in a blessing way. It's not like, you bad magician, that's a crap plan. Get up, come up with another one. It's really loving, caring, appreciative, and then suggesting moderation or change, or bringing one of the other bringing some of the other archetypes in to help. So also the example that I had earlier on, where the magician was about to deliver the bad news very clinically, not in a rude way, but just like, listen, I'm really sorry to tell you this and this has happened. These are the consequences and that's what's going to happen. And the sovereign go, that's great, because we do need to convey that information. Let's bring some lover in, and then you can convey the plan, the news in another way. Does that help, Carol?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So we're going to move today to the warrior first on page 15. And we're going to take a look at the warrior and warrior facilitation. And then we are going to look at the magician. which is hands down, pants down, my favorite space of facilitation. Having said that, they're actually all my favorites. But the magician comes very easy for me. So the warrior on page 15, without necessarily looking at the notes, we've spoken about the warrior in many different ways. Let's get some phrases from you or some attributes or qualities about the warrior. What is the warrior actually about? Just unmute yourself and let's chat.
Action.
Action, absolutely, right? That's a summary, that's a bottom line. Getting out of bed when you don't feel like it. I had a particularly challenging morning and I knew that this call was coming up, so I did not feel like it. I would have loved to cancel the call. But the warrior said, you've got a responsibility, get out on your balcony and prepare. So I did, because that's what had to happen this morning. Irrespective of my lover hurting this morning, the warrior said, I get that very kindly. It wasn't like, get your ass into action. It was like, listen, I know you're not feeling so well today, and we have work to do. So get your manual, go sit outside, let's prep. Any other words or ideas about the warrior?
Boundaries.
Boundaries, absolutely, right? So also know that as grief is a natural response to loss, anger is a natural response to when our boundaries are crossed. So perhaps next time when you get angry about something, ask yourself which boundary was just crossed. Anything else?
Benny, I think with the warrior, that they're different. That there's a sense for me that the warrior is. It's to do with strategy. So the warrior is also, well, you see, I don't know if it's warrior or sovereign, but shall we say one might be going into something and quite sort of not strident, but very clear mentally. And then arriving there and seeing, I'm just making this up as I go along, seeing that there are three people there who are all speaking about the same topic, but they've got a completely different point of view. Mm-hmm. So one realizes, okay, well, I've got to get this point across here because I want it to be considered. Now, how am I going to do that? So now with that, but because I'm already aware that I'm in the minority here. So would that then be like the warriors? Is it warrior to say, well, I don't know, I'm going to ask for a special slot or, or ask for a debate session? Or is it the warrior saying, okay, I need to stop here. I need the magician or I need the lover to take over?
So here's how I see that, and afterwards you'll tell me if it answered your question. The sovereign, remember, is about vision. It's about where do I want this mind-body realm to go so that all is well in the kingdom. So that's like the vision, right? And the vision in this case might be, I want to have a connected conversation with this group of people and I want to get my point across. Now, the sovereign has got the vision. It's not the sovereign's job to come up with a strategy of how that's going to happen. Neither is it the sovereign's job to execute it. So the sovereign says to the magician, hey, that's the vision. You work out how we're going to do that, because that's the magician's job. Intellect, reason, seeing the woods for the trees, strategize, plan, think, figure out, hibernate, heal, opening up to the magic, coming up with creative solutions, that's all in the realm of the magician. So the magician might say, having considered this, I suggest that we get into a official debate so that we can get my points on the table. And then says to the warrior, right, get your backbone in gear, get your feet in gear, take 2 steps forward and have this conversation. Hey folks, I'd like us to have a debate of sorts. So the warrior is taking action. Let's imagine that they agree to it and the debate happens. Which archetype do you reckon would be most prominent in the debate itself? Anybody?
The sovereign?
Magician.
The magician, right? So the sovereign will be online to make sure that this happens in a good way. The magician is the one doing the thinking. So in a debate, you would want to be sure that you've accessed your magician to come up with the cleverness and the quick responses and thinking on your feet and coming up with challenges. That stuff typically. So what we said earlier today, in the mind, you're going to need your mind to do an effective debate. If you are simply in lover and you have no boundaries and you just agree with everything that's being said and you're just loving them till tomorrow, it's not going to be a very effective debate. It's going to be very sweet and people are going to cry their eyes out in the audience, but it's not going to be an effective debate. So we need the warrior's backbone. The warrior's backbone to take the action, but the magician's cleverness or mindfulness, if you want, to actually have that conversation and have that debate. So that pretty much sums up what the warrior is about. What I've added here is persistence and perseverance. Getting out of bed to feed the kids even when you're sick. Why? Because that is what is required. Getting in your car and going to that meeting or going to that network meeting even though you are scared. Why? Because that is what is required. Doing your tax returns, even though that's the last thing you want to do. Why? Because that is what is required. That's it. The warrior is also the one that does physical work. So chopping the woods or paving the roads or cleaning your house or ironing your shirts, kind of the doing part of us. And that's also so the next point there on page 15, the warrior's way of expressing itself, connecting and knowing that it's alive is by doing. Right? The more it does, the more alive it feels and the more connected it feels with its environment. The wound, we said, or the axis of gateway emotion is anger, just like the other archetypes. It does not mean that a warrior is angry all the time. What it does mean, until you have done your anger work, which every single person on this planet has, including the Dalai Lama, until you do that, it's going to be very hard for you to have a balanced warrior. Another way of saying that, until you do your anger work, you are very likely going to slip into deflated or inflated warrior very easily. Doesn't mean you can never be balanced, but the balanced warrior is not going to be your natural place. You're going to either want to bite people's heads off, or you're just going to go, no, it's fine. So tools or healing the warrior, the things
Sorry, Benny, can
yes,
I just interrupt this?
Sure.
I was going to say, so I'm just trying to get this. So the warrior, in terms of getting wounded, I'm sort of looking at it from that point of view. Yeah. How does the warrior wound occur?
Okay. Let me give you one example from my life. So in my household, the only person that was allowed to be angry was my dad. When I was angry, I got physically beaten. So I learned very quickly that anger is not okay. It gets me in trouble. So I, as Robert Bly speaks about the shadow, my relationship with anger got tainted. It was not okay. And so that part went in the bag of my shadow. In my adult life, the way that shows up is I explode at a moment's notice and hurt the people I care about the most. Because I don't have a healthy relationship with anger. So I suppress it and I suppress it and I suppress it because it's not okay and I shouldn't be angry and I should just put up with all this crap and I should just go along and everything should just be fine and I don't want to stir the waters and upset people with my anger. And of course, the more I suppress it, the more the pressure builds up and then it explodes. So that would be one way of the wound happening and playing out in real life. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, good. So healing the warrior, here is what we are going to have to learn to be able to be more balanced warriors. We're going to have to learn to stand up for ourselves in a way that is mature and balanced, as opposed to being vicious. We're going to have to learn to maintain our own boundaries and at the same time respect the boundaries of others, right? The inflated warrior doesn't care about your boundaries. It comes to your desk, it interrupts what you're doing, it tells you what you need to do and it leaves. it's a bully. So we need to learn to respect the boundaries of others. And also, I recently read a fabulous book, well, not the whole book, about half of it, about depression. I forget the title of the book. The thing that really stood out for me was they said depression is not something we have, it is something we do. And there were a few bitter pills to swallow for me in that book, because I realized that me isolating myself to the extent that I had wasn't really helping me to feel better. So I had to get off my bum, pick up the phone, and start connecting with people and going out socially more. Didn't feel like doing it, didn't want to do it, but that was the thing that the warrior had to do. So going out into the world, it's all very la-di-da to go sit on the mountaintop and breathe fresh air and eat organic oranges. But at some point, for most of us, we need to move out into the world and take action to be able to express our warrior. Inflated warrior, already said, it's the bully. It's overprotective of their own boundaries. It's inflexible. That's the line. That's end of conversation. Pushing into yours, so no respect for your own boundaries. Some people are very proud of the saying, well, I just say it like it is. You know, they're very proud that they can be insulting and rude and hurtful under the mantle of, well, I'm just saying it like it is. And I'm suggesting that if you just say it like it is without any compassion, even if you speak the truth, it could be very cruel. So that's typically a sign of the inflated warrior. Overdoing things, right? Constantly doing. Never be able to sit still for more than 6 seconds at a time. That's a sign of an inflated warrior. It doesn't make it bad. In our society, if you think about it, this is actually prized. It's acknowledged. It gets the bonuses in corporations. It gets the higher pay grade. It gets the promotions. She works 18 hours a day. How amazing. We applaud that in our society, this overfixation with doing. Overtly controlling things, people, it's like my way or the highway. Intolerant, abusive, and typically, and here is the thing that is fascinating, the inflated warrior or the bully or the abuser typically attracts victims. Another way of saying that, the inflated warrior often attracts deflated warriors into their lives. And so the cycle just continues, the abusive husband or the abusive wife, and it's just the way it goes. And then on page 16, the deflated warrior is the victim. It allows itself to be bullied. It's a pushover. Whatever you say is fine. Do you want to go to the movies or to dinner? No, whatever. Do you want to do this? You want to do that? It doesn't matter. What would you like to do? Right? No decisiveness. Everything goes, everything's okay, even if it isn't. Oh, I'm really sorry. I just scratched your car. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I'm sorry I lost you this. No, don't worry about it, man. It's just okay. Right? So there's constant, and again, there's nothing wrong with being kind, compassionate, and forgiving. We're just saying if that's taken to the extreme and that's the default pattern, that's not balanced. No boundaries, say yes when they mean no, and I'll take it a step further. I think somebody with a very deflated warrior, they're not even aware of the fact that they want to say no. They are so used to saying yes. And Liesl wrote a book on the upside of saying no. Because the balanced warrior needs to learn to say no in a kind and gentle way, but yet a firm way. They do everything for everybody else, even if it kills them. You know, and often it does. Burnout. Often people in what is it called? Like people in serving professions, like, you know, Mother Teresa or people like that who deal with that type of thing often work themselves into the ground for their clients under the pretext that's like the right thing to do. Well, it's not. Because if you can do it from a balanced warrior point of view, you're going to live longer and be able to do more good, as opposed to burning yourself out and then not being available at all. Deflated warrior would be pushing into your boundaries. So, for example, a client that arrives 20 minutes early. Okay, that's invading my space. Our session starts at 10, not 20 to 10. Or they come late. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. There was lots of traffic. Okay, no, it's fine. It's fine, you know. Yeah. Don't get me started on the timing thing. Or somebody, you know, while you're in the middle of something, I just have a quick question when it's clear that you are busy doing something else. And then the same thing as we said with the inflated, it attracts abusive relationships, either professionally or personally. They attract the inflated warriors. And then that cycle just kind of dances around until one of the two actually breaks it. Or they tell themselves they have to put up with something. You know, once the kids leave home, then I'll ask for divorce. But until then, I'm going to put up with the abuse. And of course, that's just a fallacy, right? The kids go leave the house, then it's when I retire, I'll do the divorce. And then it's when I'm dead, I'll do the divorce. So no real sense of boundaries. Common careers, builders, soldiers, law enforcement, mechanics, bus drivers, people who do stuff. Physically active out in the world, often with their hands, often physical labor. All that is common careers for people who have a strong sense of warrior. Any comments or questions about the warrior? Okay, that's the right answer. Page 25. Let's take a look at how we can most support clients. Page 25. Reminder what this actually means. It means that when a client arrives and they exhibit signs of an inflated or deflated warrior, page 25 is our go-to page. Here are the tools and the tips and the things we can do to help them either to one of the other archetypes or to help them to more of a balanced warrior in itself. Now, I do say in the second paragraph there, if you have a challenging relationship with anger, remember that anger is the gateway emotion to the warrior. In other words, do your anger work and it'll be easier for you to access a mature warrior. If you have a challenging relationship with anger, some of these techniques might be hard for your clients to do. And you just do the best you can, and you might need to do some other work with them before they'll be able to do these exercises. The first thing that you can do is to engage the magician to help them get in touch with anger, right? So people with a horrific life who've been abused to the point of just mind-numbing confusion might still say, no, you know what? They really did the best they could. I mean, I understand that. I forgive them completely. And also, I mean, the other good thing about all the abuse that's happened to me is it's made me the person that I am today. You know, it was really for the greater good that they abused the crap out of me, right? So those types of statements tell me there is a very good chance this person hasn't done the anger work, and this is not the way of the warrior, right? This is a very, very deflated warrior. You can cross my boundaries any which way, and I'm going to turn the other cheek. The way we can help them see the woods for the trees is to access the magician. Remember, the magician is opposite the lover. The magician is thinking. So the good thing about the magician is we do not need them to get in touch with their anger because they're not in touch with the anger. They are convinced it's just been fine. And of course, I'm not saying it's not for the greater good, and I'm not saying it didn't make you the person you are. I'm just saying that anger is a natural response when a boundary is being crossed. So if your boundaries have been crossed and you haven't expressed the anger, not necessarily expressed, you haven't healed the anger, it's eating you up on the inside. There is no other way about it. When we suppress any emotion, we said this on the first call, it leads to depression and illness and all sorts of stuff. So instead of wanting to force this client to feel their anger, which they are clearly not ready to feel, they don't even know they have it. It's not that they're lying to you, right? This is an important thing. It's not they're lying to you. They just don't feel the anger. They've convinced themselves it's really okay. Ask a magician question. Okay, so all this abuse that's happened to you, what does that cost you? Now we've asked them an intellectual question. And in my experience, when they start answering this question, it helps them to get in touch with what they've actually lost on. There's also a typo there. It says, what has is cost you? It should be, what has it cost you? And when they start making that list, it'll probably be quite a long list of what it's cost them their innocence, it cost them their confidence, it's cost them relationships, it might have cost them money, it might have cost them their health, you know, whatever they come up with. And the more they can come up with what it's actually cost them, the easier it might be for them to even start touching the anger about what they have lost on. Or what other archetype might be triggered when they connect with what they've lost.
Oh.
The lover, right? Absolutely.
Lover.
The lover, yes. And there's a fascinating interrelationship between the warrior and the lover, or more to grief and anger. Sometimes some clients need to truly work their anger about the abuse first before they get to the grief of what it's actually cost them. And some other clients need to do the crying bit first. They need to heal the wound of the lover first, and then they get in touch and go, but that wasn't okay. It's like, yeah, I know. So just know either way, there's an interrelationship between those two. If with a client, one way doesn't work, you go down the other way. If the lover work is not ready to happen, do the warrior work. If the warrior work isn't ready to happen, do the lover work. And the only way you're going to find out is to suggest these exercises and see how they respond, right? There's no right and wrong. There's just information coming back from the clients. Now, a phrase that I use very often that you might want to take note of is the word good. It's very simple. Good. G-O-O-D. A client says, I am so angry about what happened. I go, okay, good. Why wouldn't I say it's good? It's happening. And what I want to do is I want to encourage more of it, because if it's in there, it's festering. And I want us to find a way to heal this. Or I want the client to find a way to heal it. I'm just there to kind of hold their hand for a little bit. So that's what it says in the next paragraph. If they get angry at you, great. It's never personal. It's got nothing to do with you. Get excited, because they're starting to access the warrior. And if they've been very inflated, sometimes they need to go, or if they've been very deflated, they sometimes go from the deflated completely over to the inflated for a while to get back to a place of balance. So we have to allow for that. We have to allow for this correction, this course correction. Most people don't go from deflated to balanced. They flex the muscle the other way first until they come back to a place of balance. And if we can allow that and hold that, client gets angry at you for being 2 minutes late, or they get angry at you for doing this or for not acknowledging that, get very, very excited, because they are flexing a new muscle. Now, so we have to allow the anger, and depending on the situation where you work, it might not be appropriate for them to scream and shout, in an office with 20 other people. But find a way as best you can to really allow them to feel safe to express the anger that they perhaps for the first time feel, by encouraging them, by giving them a pillow to hit, by getting them to scream and shout if that's appropriate for the environment, or whichever way they want to express it in. Another such a simple question that I use often in group facilitation: when they get in touch with the anger, you ask them simply, how would you like to express it? Or a less personal question, how would the anger like to express itself? And then once they've given you the answer, you do what you can with the environment you have to allow that to happen. Now it says there in that bullet point, the second bullet point on page 25, if they need to, teach them the difference between expressing anger and becoming abusive. Who can tell me the difference?
One's what you're feeling and another's what you're doing to somebody else.
Okay, so I could be livid. I could be livid with anger, and I could communicate with you, stop seeing you as a person, seeing you as an object of my disgruntlement, and I can scream and shout and raise my voice and point my finger, maybe even swear. That's abusive. Doesn't matter how we dress it up, that's abusive, right? Short with a tone of voice, sharp, it's abusive. It's not respectful, it's not loving, and it's not kind. Now, if we go to the other way, people then say, oh, well, then it's not okay to express my anger. But here's the thing. If you are in touch with clear, balanced anger that is appropriate for the situation, you can have a conversation with a tone of voice that I'm having right now and express your anger. You know what? When you did that thing that you did, that crossed a boundary for me, and that's really not okay by me. So here's what I'd like moving forward. This and this and this and this and this. I'm very angry about what happened, and this is what I need moving forward. in a respectful tone of voice. Now, for some people like me who had a challenging relationship with anger, I didn't even know that was possible. For me, it was either explode or suppress it. Explode or suppress it. The more I suppress it, the more I explode. It's crazy. Well, it's not crazy. It's just kind of the way that this stuff works. So teaching them if you need to. And it says it a bit further down, but it seems appropriate to mention it now. Get them to role play with you. Let them practice it in a safe environment in your office so that it's easier for them to use that skill in real life. For example, you might ask them, so you set this up as a role play. It's very important you tell them, okay, we're going to do some role play now, so that they keep remembering it's a role play and it's not you as a person trying to incite them in any way. The role play is going to be, I'm going to ask you to do something and you're going to say no. Now, most people, when you ask them to do something and they don't want to, they give you a reason. Oh, I'd love to come to the party, but the thing is, I'm really busy doing something else. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with giving a reason. It's just think about the motivation for actually giving the reason. What's up with just saying, I'd love to, and I'm not coming? Full stop. Now, that's hard for most people, so that's typically the homework I give them. In the next week, 3 times, say no to something without giving people a reason, right? That'll get the backbone up. That'll get the sense of boundary. And is it hard to do? For some people, it's excruciatingly hard. So that's their work. The other thing you can do is role play that. So, okay, I'm going to ask you to do some things. It's just a role play. I don't actually want you to do them. I'm going to ask you to do some things, and you're going to say back no. Would you please stand up and open the door? No. Would you please wash my dishes? No, right? Role play, role play, role play. It sounds so simple, but once that's why you spend so much time in breakout rooms practicing stuff and sharing stuff. Once you've got it in your body, it's different to just a mind concept. You might also use role play for them to express anger or towards somebody that they need to have this conversation in real life, but they're really nervous about it. They're nervous they might lose it or it might not go down well. Get them to role play with you in your office. Pretend to be the other person and then get them to express the anger in a non-abusive way. Help them make decisions and choices, right? We spoke about that last time as well. Choices about the session. Would you rather come Wednesday or Thursday? Would you like this chair or that sofa? So in terms of homework, we can do one of 2 things, this or that. Which would you prefer? Given everything that you've presented so far, there's your mum work, there's some stuff around your body, and there's stuff around money. Where do we start, right? Empower them with choices, because choices enforce boundaries. Encourage them to raise their voice. Okay, it helps them physiologically to access the warrior. Those of you familiar with tapping, when we say, I deeply and completely love and accept myself anyway, I'm not talking about the client has to scream and yell. But for some people who are so soft-spoken and it is so hard or virtually impossible to get in touch with any anger because they are just sweetness itself, what might help is physiologically starting to support the process by saying, I deeply and completely love and accept myself, right? Even just that non-threatening phrase. We're not swearing at anybody. We're not attacking anybody. But help them to get the oomph up. Help them to get the energy up. We spoke about giving them homework that is about boundaries and doing role plays where appropriate. And then, again, this is how we dance with the archetypes. When they are able to do that in your office, you, without even having to think about it, move to the sovereign and you bless them for what they've just done. Be proud of them. Be excited. This might be the first time ever they've said no to anybody. Right? It is something to be celebrated. If they've been in procrastination mode, let me ask you, what is the main driver in your experience for procrastination?
Fear.
Fear of what?
Fear of not being good enough, or fear of not getting it right.
Okay, so we might say the desire, it's a fear of not being perfect. So that's the one. The other cause of procrastination, anybody else have any other thoughts on it?
Safety, protection.
Protection from?
It's not safe to step out.
Okay, I might get hurt, I might get judged, I might get rejected. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Another cause for procrastination?
Well, just maybe this is just restating what's already been said, but fear of rejection. Fear of failure.
Absolutely. The other thing in my experience that causes procrastination is simply not knowing what to do. Think about it. If you have a to-do list, and on the to-do list, one of your items is marketing, good luck with that. Tell me how it works. Most people you don't even know what marketing means. Should I send newsletters? Or Carol knows exactly what I'm talking about based on her reaction. It's such a wide, big, crazy concept. Or feel better, or live healthier. What does that even mean? Where do I start? Break it down. Help them to break it down. All right. So I get that the prospect of moving house is overwhelming and you haven't done anything about it, even though you have to be out by the end of the month. Let's start breaking it down step by step by step, what needs to happen so that the warrior knows exactly what he needs to do. Remember, the warrior is not the one who works out the plan. The warrior just wants to execute. And we have to give it the proper task to execute it. Otherwise, it doesn't know what to do. Now, if they've been in procrastination or avoidance or what I call jelly mode, it's just like a bit wobbly and not really wanting to do anything or being able to do anything, help them pick one thing. One thing in the next week. And the one thing could be as simple as Google houses in my area for 20 minutes. To see if I can find a new house, right? I'm going to walk up and down my stairs twice a day instead of taking the lift, whatever. Very simple, specific action to enable and support the warrior to take the action. There's also this concept. Yes, go ahead.
It's also could be fear of commitment, like just.
In what way? I don't know. In what way?
Just actually making a commitment to yes or no.
Yeah. So again, we're back to, in my experience, the fear of the commitment to yes or no is the perfectionism that's behind that. Because I've got to make the right decision. I've got to pick the right one. If it's not right, I'm not going to be good enough, or I'm going to impact you, or whatever the case might be. It's like, and that's something that I'm very familiar with over the last week. I'm really noticing this part of me that thinks it has to get everything right. And when I was a child, I had to, or I was punished. So, it makes logical sense. It just causes a lot of pain. So holding your boundaries with them. When a client is consistently late, and I have one client that is typically 5 or 10 minutes late, I do not extend the session time. So of the hour, we now have 50 minutes left. I don't say anything about it. We don't need to discuss it. Our session is from 4 to 5. We finish at 5, irrespective of the time you come. Now, if they're like half an hour late, I will typically let them know before the time. If you still want today's session, we need to start in the next 5 minutes. I'm not really in the business of doing 20-minute sessions. Some days I do because, that's what's required. But it's about honoring your own boundaries with them. And remember what we said before when we spoke about the sovereign. If the client's sovereign is very wounded, what is the emotional reality of a sovereign that's very wounded?
Not good enough.
Not good enough?
They'll be very hurt.
Be very hurt, and remember the shame word, right? So this is where shame lives. I'm not worthy, all that stuff. When a client comes with that predominant wound and they're already feeling inferior and deflated, maybe today is not the day to have this conversation about being 3 minutes late. Maybe today we need to bolster the sovereign a little bit. And once the sovereign is more online, we can always go back to the warrior stuff later. Or if we do want to address the warrior boundaries, our boundaries, you know what, John, I much appreciate you being on time for your sessions. Just to make life easier for me, would you be willing to wait in your car until 5 minutes to and then come in? So very kind, very gentle request, not like this is really inconveniencing me and, blah, blah, blah. So not picking your battles, but it's not even about picking, it's about being sensitive to where the wound hurts the most and then applying the tool that's going to give you the best results. If somebody's already in shame and we make a big deal about them being 5 minutes late, we're just going to shut them down. It's going to be very hard for them to open up to us when they are hard enough on themselves as it is. Now, it's not just about holding the line with your boundaries. It's also about being true to your word. So when you say, I'm going to send you that video clip, make sure that you send them the video clip. If you say next week, we're going to take a look at what happened with your mother when you were 4, be sure that next week you look at what happened with their mother when they was 4, unless something else comes up and then you say, today we were going to look at your mother when you were 4. This seems more important. We'll park that until we get to it, right? Be impeccable with your word. That's also a warrior trait anyway. Warriors says what they mean and they mean what they say. They say yes when they mean yes. They say no when they mean no. And that's the bottom line. So you keep your word. You show up for sessions. You get your paperwork in order. You create the structure. You do whatever you need to do. The temptation might be for you to ignore the fact that they have crossed boundaries or broken promises. For example, because of the overwhelm and the procrastination, you have broken down the task of moving house into smaller tasks. And the first one, 20 minutes on Google, search houses in my price bracket. Now, next week when they come, you might be nervous or anxious to ask them if they actually did that in case they didn't, and then you don't know what to do with that information. Now is not the time to slide, because they're going to know that you slid. They're going to know that you gave them a pass. Or if they have actually done it, they're waiting for you to ask them so they can say, yes, I've done it. I'm really proud of myself. So you stick to your warrior. You get your backbone up and you do what you need to do to actually have a clean warrior relationship with them, asking them the questions that need to be asked and dealing with the answers that come, as opposed to avoiding anything, avoiding the elephants, as if you fall in love with presenting. Avoiding the elephants is going to cause more harm in the end. You need to address what needs to be addressed, what's in the room, because whether you speak about it or not, it's in the room anyway. So you might as well make it spoken. I mentioned in the manual a couple of times, so what tapping. This is something that came to me very simply a couple of years ago, and I used it with a client just spontaneously. So he didn't do his homework, and he went into an enormous amount of shame because, you know, he's the perfectionist. Everything's got to be perfect, and there should not be any way to judge him in any way, shape, or form. Everything's always got to be right, and he didn't do his homework. So I said, give me your hand. And we did some tapping. I said, even though I didn't do my homework, I love and accept myself anyway, the typical 3 times phrase. And then I said, I didn't do my homework. So what? I didn't do my homework for today. So what? I didn't do my homework for today. So what? And within 2 rounds, he was like, oh, actually, yeah, it's not that big a deal. Like, who cares? Didn't do his homework. In the bigger scheme of things, it doesn't mean he's a bad person. It just means there's information for us. So when it's appropriate, and if you don't do tapping, you might just use the phrase. You go, you didn't do your homework? Okay, what? So what? Let's move on. And not make a deal of it if they are predominantly in the emotion of shame. Clear, direct energy and direction from you. In the balanced warrior, there is no room for wishy-washy. It's very black and white. It's very clear and simple. It's just the way that it is. Now, some of you might be familiar with provocative EFT. I have experimented with it. It is often backfired. It gets people resistance up more than it does any good. So I coined this phrase, semi-provocative EFT. When somebody says, I'm good enough, or actually that should say when I'm not good enough. Yeah, okay, so there's a typo on the last paragraph on page 26. It should say semi-provocative EFT. Original provocative does not work for some. And then in the next line, more gentle, for example, when they say, I'm not good enough. You know, actually, it could be either one. It doesn't matter. It could be either one. Because here's what happens. A client says, well, I am good enough. And I say, well, how do you know? How do you know that you're good enough? And it's semi-provocative. I'm not just agreeing with them. So sometimes when I ask that question, I get the look. Like, how the hell, how dare you ask me that question? What are you suggesting? I'm not good enough? So it gets their anger up, right? And then they start justifying it. And that's the time when I get really excited. When they can start justifying from a place of anger to me, how they do know they're good enough. Because of this and because of this and because of this, I'm a really good person. Good. That's got a little bit more emphasis than well, I suppose I'm not that bad, right? Which isn't helpful for us in any way, shape, or form. So asking that question, how do you know? We spoke about it last time as well. How do you know and what does it mean to you? If it stirs up any irritation or frustration for them, good. Then they are busy in the process of doing the warrior anger work, which would enable them to have easier access to the balanced one. Everybody take a nice deep breath in and out. I'm going to put you into groups of 3, different groups than last time. You have 5 minutes between your group to talk about the warrior and what it means to you. I'll see you back in 5 minutes. Invitation on your screen. See you back in 5. Welcome back. What happened? What came up?
Bennie?
Yes.
So the aspect of passive aggressive.
What about that aspect?
So I know that it's as Robin reminded us, there is the manipulation part of it. So it could be in the magician, but it's also, how does it also fit? Is it a deflated warrior? Because it's not anger that's kind of verbally directly expressed. It's the anger that, so like road rage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not angry with my children, but I can't express it, so I express it in the car.
It's a great question. Typically for me, manipulation live in the magician area. Any other ideas on Jean's question? If we have passive aggression, where would we say the wound is? Or where, and let's rephrase that. From which archetype are we acting out of when we are passive aggressive?
The warrior.
Warrior.
Inflated being aggressive to passive being deflated, warrior.
Yeah, it's probably, thank you. It's probably a dance, Jean, between the two.
Yeah.
Right? The deflated warrior goes to passive, and then the inflated warrior goes to aggressive. So it seems to me like a combination of the two, or a dance between the two.
Yeah. And a little bit of magician, because they're doing the thinking while they're doing the manipulation.
Leslie, say a little bit louder, the magician.
Oh, sorry. And as you said, the magician also at the same time, because that's where the manipulation and the think about how to get around somebody.
So I think again, let me leave that statement exactly where it is, which is nowhere. Anything else that came out of your conversations?
Yes, Bennie, one thing I've been thinking about since the beginning of this course is my issue often is with inflated warriors. And looking through the manual, correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like most of the techniques you're giving us deal with a deflated warrior. What do you do, not so much in a client situation, but in personal life, when you've got very inflated warriors, generally now, I'm speaking generally, around how to be a balanced warrior in that sort of really aggressive energy.
Yeah.
Because Sharon and I were talking, and she had mentioned that going into the lover archetype with them tends to make them even more aggressive. So it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I'm wanting to find my backbone with that in my personal life.
So a few years ago, somebody that runs a school, she said to me that one of their classes, she said, is unteachable. So I reached out to somebody that I regard as an education expert, and he said, well, if they're unteachable, don't teach them. It's like, what do you mean? He goes, let them play, let them do other stuff, right? So for me, the thing with aggression is, for me, it's about boundaries, and it's about saying, that's not okay by me. So for you to be aggressive with me doesn't work for me. It's really not. It crosses my boundaries. So a few things. If it is in a personal relationship, perhaps saying, I love you and I want to be with you. And for now, I'm taking time out until we can have a conversation. I totally appreciate that you're angry and you're entitled to all of it. And I'm going to take time out now. I think, as you say, when anger is escalated, it becomes unreasonable. There is no reasoning with it. It just takes a life of its own, and the person who's in it also knows that it's taking a life of its own. There's no reason, there's no time for conversation. So I think that would be the one thing. If it's not personal, if it's not a personal relationship, if it's a guy at the store, you know, just drawing the boundaries. Say, I don't have to listen to this. I'm leaving. Once you can speak to me respectfully, please give me a call. Or I'll come back tomorrow and see if we can resolve this, but this is not okay by me. And again, you know, we can respond with an inflated warrior saying, this is unacceptable to me that you speak to me this way. And we're just doing the exact same thing that they are doing. We are speaking to them in a disrespectful way. So I'm not suggesting it's easy. I'm suggesting that's the ideal when we are really balanced. Now, here's the thing also for me. I do have a sometimes challenging relationship with anger. And that also means that I spend a lot of energy trying to prevent people from being angry at me. And it also means that when somebody is angry to me in my face, it really triggers me. I can become very insecure, not in a client situation ever, but in my personal life. When somebody's angry with me, it really throws me. And I don't have the wherewithal to deal with it. So perhaps with a client that is in that situation, we can role play with them. It's very important that you remind them it's a role play. Otherwise, they'll confuse and think you're angry with them. Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to pretend to be angry at you, and let's see, you know, help them with a strategy. But for me, it's almost having to withdraw from the situation to allow the person to be angry in themselves. And if I'm a facilitator, not personally affected by it, or maybe even on a good day when I'm more balanced, is become curious about the anger. So listen, man, I can see you're about to explode. What's going on? Like, what you so angry about? Talk to me. Now, also notice that I didn't use the lover language. So, John, I can see you very angry, okay? Because you're about to be punched in the face. So I up my energy. I'm not getting angry, but I'm upping my energy to match his level. I can see you're about to explode, man. What's going on? Like, talk to me. What? Right? So even just meeting them where they're at and communicating that you actually want more information. You're not shutting them down. You actually tell me more. What are you angry about? And whatever they say, again, if you're personally affected by it, it's a little trickier. But if you're not personally affected by it, go, man, I can see why you're so upset. Even if you don't agree with the content, you know? Because it's not about you seeing if you can be as angry as them or you appreciating their anger. It's about you simply understanding what they're angry about and offering them the compassion of one human being understanding another human being, even if they completely disagree. So, you know, clients that come to me and go, oh, you know, the traffic is horrendous and there's no. I go, yeah, I can tell you're really upset. Take a seat. I'm not agreeing with them the traffic is horrendous or the politicians are horrendous because it's a pointless exercise. But meeting them energetically, and then I think what we all ultimately want, and I mean that, I think all of us, under all of this, we want to be heard. We want to be heard. Like, this is my voice. This is what I feel like. I want you to just hear me. You don't need to fix me. You don't even have to agree with me, but please, can you just hear me? So if we can create a space for somebody who's very angry to really just hear them, I think that might be useful. Does that help?
Thank you, Ben.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so we're moving on to the magician on page 13. Quick summary of the magician, and then we're going to go into some of the tools. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. I do want to finish on time, and I do want to get to the magician facilitation at the back. So a couple of quick, we've spoken about the magician in many different ways since we started this course. What would you say are the qualities, attributes of the magician? What's the magician about?
The thinker, the one that analyzes situations and works things out.
Absolutely. Anything else?
The problem solver.
Problem solver for sure. Anything else?
Mediator.
Mediator. Carol?
I said the magician has wisdom.
Oh, the magician has wisdom. Absolutely. For me, the balanced facilitator is a magician. And what it says in the further notes is when you are deflated in your magician, and it plays out by you telling yourself, and it might be true, like some of this stuff is new, right? You've never done them. So your magician might be a bit deflated and go, oh, I'm not quite sure how to do this. And what if the client says that? It's going to be very hard for you to be a balanced magician. And here's what typically happens for some of us. When our magician gets deflated, it is so unbearable that we inflate it to compensate. So we become overly controlling. So that, just notice the play again between the inflated and the deflated. One often leads to the other. So for me, the magician is also about internal healing. In some circles that I used to be part of, we speak about the bear going into hibernation. So transformation, magic, shamanism, all that kind of inner healing type self-work, I would all put into the magician quarter. The magician knows it's alive when it thinks. It loves thinking. It loves intellectual conversations about concepts and plans and talking about things and strategizing, and it connects through thinking. The gateway is fear. It doesn't mean that when you're scared, you're in the magician quarter. It also doesn't mean the magician is always scared. It just means when you've done your fear work and therefore you are in a place of more trust, and it doesn't matter whether you believe in a God that you trust in, or you trust in yourself, or you trust in your higher self, or you trust in the goodness of the world, the more easy it is for you to access your balanced magician. So in terms of facilitation, when you trust the process completely, like I trust an EFT or a matrix session completely, it means I'm in the moment facilitating to the best of my abilities. I'm not controlling the session, and I'm certainly not abdicating either. And then when we can really step out of the way and trust the process, that's when the magic happens. That's when that phrase comes out of your mouth that you hadn't planned, or you come up with this new technique like so what tapping in the moment. Didn't try and think that one up. It just kind of happens. Healing the magician with clarity, right? The deflated magician is unclear, is confused, can't see the woods for the trees. So we bring some clarity to it. So the magician goes, now I see what's going on. Perspective, insight, understanding, and then lightness, not as opposed to darkness, but lightness as opposed to heaviness. Humor also lives in the magician. The magician in the old days would have been a court jester for the king or the queen. Right? That's pure magician energy. So having fun, being light about things. And then building trust with yourself, with others, with your definition of God, with the world, with the universe, whatever. The balanced magician is kind of fairly self-explanatory, can work things out. It's okay with not knowing. And it's okay with not knowing because he trusts. So in a session with a client, I have no idea where we're going. I just know we're going somewhere. So completely trusting the process, finds the quiet moments, right? Introspection, looks within for answers as opposed to outside, intelligent, smart, can work things out, objective, rational, and reasonable, right? Remember on the horizontal axis, the lover is here all feeling, and the magician is on the other side, away from feeling. So it's very much a thinking exercise. Can see the woods for the trees, makes tough decisions based on reason. And great sense of humor and use of humor, right? There's a lightness about a balanced magician. Deflated is confused, non-assertive, calls himself stupid. That's why stupid is in inverted commas. I don't believe that anybody is stupid, but I do know that some people believe they're stupid. Probably because they've been told that when they were 5, and so therefore they believe it and prove it. They can't work things out. They're easily confused. They're unfocused. And they're lost in overwhelming detail. We spoke about that before. That's one of the main causes of procrastination. Just can't connect with a bigger picture or perspective. Inflated magician is a sophisticated master manipulator. They manipulate you so well that you don't even know it's happened. Right? They're just experts. Might be psychopaths. People like that. Just like masterfully manipulating the outcome without you even knowing. Often highly intelligent. Street smart, right? They can figure things out. They see the lay of the land. They know how to get their own way. Very, very, very judgmental. Not just of others, but also on themselves. Highly judgmental. Sarcastic or cynical. And as I said before, the court jester would be the inflated magician. I'm not sure actually about inflated. I'm thinking in the old days, I don't know if the court jester would have been inflated or balanced. I don't know in this moment. Common careers, lawyers, mathematicians, accountants, politicians, varying on the balanced, inflated and deflated scale. You could put politicians where you want. Any comments or questions? Good. So let's move to page 22. That'll be our last content session for today. There's a typo on the top of that page. Top of page 22, it says the gateway emotion to the warrior is fear. Please change warrior to magician. Top of page 22, first sentence. The gateway emotion to the magician is fear. Talked about this before. Doesn't mean the magician is scared all the time. It means you got work to do. If you feel a lot of fear, it's going to be very hard for you to be a balanced magician. So do your fear work. Find out what your fears are about and release or heal it as best you can so that you can become more of a balanced magician. Because when you live in fear, you cut off the magic to a large extent. You move to a controlling place. You want to control the outcome of everything, which isn't just exhausting and leads to depression and disease, but is also futile. Because you can't even control your own breathing or the way your liver works or the way your lungs move or the way the blood pumps in you. So good luck with controlling the whole universe. Ask me, I still regularly try and do that. Bless me. Okay. And the way to get more comfortable is to practice, practice, practice. Take one of these techniques, set up a swap session with somebody, or just in your next client session. Just implement it. Just do it. Okay, once you've done it 2, 3, 4 times, you're confident in it, and then you can relax into the process, chuck the manual, and allow the process to unfold in the way that it needs to unfold. Now, that box at the bottom of page 22, this is the same paradox as we've had with all the other archetypes. We access the understanding, distance, insight, and perspective. In other words, we access the gifts of the magician when we step into the archetype of the magician, and we step into the archetype by dissociating and getting the understanding, distance, insight, and perspective. Who can explain to me what that means?
Take ourselves out of the equation and we step back and look at it dispassionately.
Okay, so here's so great. So if we were to step out of ourselves, as Leslie say, we are using the tool of dissociation. We dissociate with our strong emotions and feelings. So on the lover warrior axis, we move towards the warrior. We pull ourselves out. We take a good look at it. So in other words, we are using one of the tools for the magician is to dissociate in order to access the magician archetype. So the minute that we start dissociating ourselves, what I'm suggesting is the gifts of the magician becomes more accessible to us. And conversely, the more we can actively step into the magician, the more we have access to the other gifts. So a client can either have the wherewithal to step into the balanced magician and then get all the gifts, or if that's hard for them to do because they don't have the balanced magician energy, we use any of the magician tools to get them there. And if we use one tool to get them into the magician, balanced magician, they have access to all the gifts and tools that the magician offers. That's the magic of it. And that's true for all the stuff. If we want to help a client into more balanced lover, the balanced lover has access to all the emotions. The way to get them to the lover, if they can't just access it, is by helping them get in touch with their grief. That also helps them to access the lover gifts. So in terms of practically, what does this mean? And how do we facilitate people? On page 23, when a client is the deflated magician, we want to help them to move to clarity. Remember, deflated magician is can't see the woods for the trees, confused, overwhelmed, don't know what to do, don't know what's going on, feeling stupid, all that stuff. So we want them to move to clarity. The inflated magician is, now this becomes interesting. We can try and tell a client or tell ourselves to simply stop being an inflated magician, right? Just cut it out. Get back to balance. Yeah, okay, because some of you are smiling, because tell me how that works, right? That's never going to happen. Except Bob Newhart thinks it would, but it won't. So if we can actually allow the client, those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, go Google Bob Newhart, Stop It. It's hilarious. Especially for those of us that work with people, which is pretty much all of us. Bob Newhart, stop it. It's like a 5-minute skit. Stop it. When somebody shows up as an inflated magician, instead of wanting them to be different, let's welcome that energy into the room. We've got to meet clients where they're at. So if a client comes to your therapy session or your coaching session or your counseling session and they're very much in their head, good luck telling them to drop into their heart. It's disrespectful. It's not where they're at. If they knew how to drop into their heart, they would. But they don't. That's why they're coming to you in the first place. So meet them where they're at. Welcome and acknowledge their smartness and all the details and all the stuff they can talk about and how well they know themselves and all the other stuff. And once you've met them, just like the angry guy that we just spoke in terms of Carol's question, once you've met them where they are, now you might lead them somewhere a bit more useful than completely stuck in the magician. One of my favorite questions, we spoke about it last time, I ask clients between sessions, what are you noticing? It's a magician question. I want them to intellectually recognize the changes that are happening. What are you noticing? Or what did you notice in the last week? What did you notice since our last session? It's a very open question. It's not what did you notice in relation to your anger. It's what did you notice? Get them to think about it. Get some insight. The morph technique, which I realized I hadn't posted yet, so I made another note and we'll post it this time. Strategize, right? Ask them what they think. If they're a strong magician, why wouldn't you use it? They know themselves better than you will ever know them. Okay, John, great. So now all the things, because a magician is going to arrive with a whole list of things to work on, for example, right? They've thought about this for the last 7 weeks. They've written copious journals. They've got the bullet list of things that need to be fixed. And it's now, right, let's get to it. Use the magician. Great, you've done. So you jump into sovereign. Amazing, all the prep work you've done. I really appreciate that. Obviously, you take this quite seriously. Well done. Now, with all the stuff that's on your list that you'd like to get to, where are we going to start? Which one's most important, right? Get the magician online. Use the magician to your advantage rather than you racking your brain which one is you should prioritize. You really have no idea. Get them to choose. Ask them that question we spoke of last time. I didn't know it was actually in the manual. What does that mean to you? It's a magician question. Well, today at the office, my boss looked at me and raised their eyebrows. Now, you will interpret that through your lenses about what that means, but it's not about you. So what does that mean to you that she did that? Well, it means she has contempt for me. Okay, good. That might be different to my interpretation, but now we're meeting the client where they're at and using their information. Lovingly yet firmly challenge intellectually. Like, really? So missing your deadline by $1,000, that means like you failed? Like, really? We spoke about this before, right? In one of the other quarters, like really challenging them lovingly and kindly and almost incredulously. Like, really? As in, what a stupid thing. But I'm not going to say the word stupid. I'm just going to imply it with my tone of voice. And then asking them another magician question, which has got nothing to do with feeling. This is to do with being rational. Okay, John, so let me check with you. I often do this with clients. If I missed my target by $1,000, would you call me a failure? Never. Never. None of us are as harsh on other people as we are on ourselves. Now, after you've asked the question, there's nothing more to do. You don't need to have a whole conversation about it. You can say, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then you move on to the next thing. Trusting that the seed that was just planted will grow and they'll come to another conclusion other than they have necessarily failed. Humor. You know, sometimes we can laugh about the most serious, significant. John, are you raising your hand or just trying to block the sun? Oh, you are. Yeah. Go ahead.
What do you do when they say yes? Because I did that the other day in a session and shit, it backfired.
You fire them on the spot. You say that's wrong answer. Bad student. Bad client. I'll just go, oh, okay. Okay. So now I know they have an absolute belief that they're a failure based on missing that target. And okay. So again, we have so many different tools. I wouldn't even say that it backfired, John. I'll just say you didn't get the response you wanted. And typically, when you don't get the response you want in a therapy session, I suggest you move on. And I'm not suggesting you did this at all. It's not about you, John. This is not the time to get into a debate. right? No, but hold on. I mean, your target was 90,000. You've got 89. How can you be a failure? Don't go there. It's not meeting them where they're at. It'll just bring up more resistance and it won't wash. So, okay. So it's information for us. We can often laugh about very serious things. Allow it when it happens. We speak in EFT about the signs of releasing: sighing, farting, yawning, burping, crying, sweating, itching, laughing. It's a way to release stuff, right? I'll speak later about the profane and the profound. Just when we can have these beautiful chuckles about the most painful things. When it happens, allow it to happen and encourage it. So what tapping, which you spoke about already, because it challenges the mind that this is such a big deal. No, it's not. Who cares? So you had another 10 cigarettes in the week. Who cares? So what? Like, what the hell? It doesn't mean anything. Just to kind of lighten up a little bit. And because here's the thing. Somebody said they will, part of their homework is they'll smoke only 5 cigarettes a day. Now they smoke 10. Now they come to your office and now they're deep in shame and failure and all that stuff. You can spend the whole session just trying to get them out of that hole. Do some so what tapping. Probably within 3 minutes they're out of the hole and let's move on, right? Let's not turn the homework into a whole therapy session necessarily, except when you do. Shoe on the other foot. So they might say, whatever they say, may judge themselves for an experience. Let's say somebody yelled at them and they then left that conversation going, I don't want to talk to you. And that now means that they're incompetent in dealing with conflict. So, okay, cool. So again, the shoe on the other foot. If your partner or somebody they care about did the same behavior, how would you judge them? Or specifically in terms of abuse, quite often abuse victims will say, childhood abuse more so in my experience, will say, oh, well, you know, the thing we had in the beginning of this conversation, my parents did the best they could, and, you know, at least they didn't burn me with cigarettes. They kind of justify the abuse that happened. Okay, so let me ask you this, John. If you were to get home today and your 4-year-old son was being abused in the way that you were abused, how would you feel and what would you do? Okay? It accesses the magician energy. It's an intellectual question. And 9 times out of 9, the response to that question is, I'll rip the perpetrator apart. I will probably kill them, right? Good. You don't even have to go further with that conversation. Trust the seed just got planted. Hold on. If I will do that, then surely what happened to me was wrong as well, or was inappropriate, or was hurtful, or whatever the case might be. Now, bring on the judge. I have actually taken this to its furthest extent. I have suggested to a client to pretend to be a judge in a court of law and to find as much proof as they could, or an advocate in a court of law, not a judge, to be in a court of law and come up with as much evidence that they were rubbish or useless or pathetic or a loser or whatever the thing may be. And that could go on for a while. And of course, you know, if you do tapping, I would tap all the time and they came up with every possible single reason why they are rubbish. So the magician judges, that's what he does, invite it into the room rather than saying, you know, let's say a client says, oh, I'm so ugly. And you go, oh, no, you're beautiful. It's not meeting the client where they're at. Your intention is good. The impact would not be good. They would not feel listened to. They would not feel heard, and they'll probably shut down to some extent. Because all it means is every time I say something, you're going to dispute me. So go with the judge, invite the judge into the room, and then you could, if you wanted to, after that, you could say, okay, so let's imagine you are for the defense. So come up with reasons why you are whatever the opposite of rubbish or useless or pathetic is. Now, this is one of my favorite tools. Pull them out of the session any time you need more information. If they're in a deep place of shame because they are a deflated sovereign, they're in a deep place of grief because they're in a lover, they're in a raging, angry place because they're in the warrior, you can always pull them out of their chair to get more information. For example, a client just keeps raving and ranting 12 minutes into your session. Nothing else comes out of her. She is just going ballistic. Now, at some point, it's going to not serve the session, right? We want to allow them to express the anger, but also we need to find a way to help them release it and heal it, as opposed to just ranting more. Remember, as John Bradshaw says, shame begets shame. I believe that anger begets anger. John, just hold it there just for 1 minute. Just stand up out of your chair. Come stand over here with me. Now you start speaking about the client as if they're someone else. So you're not saying, when you are so angry, what do you need? You point to the chair, you use their first name, and you say, John, tell me, when John is so angry, what does he really need? Right? Get more information. What might the response be to that question? What would somebody need that's in a rage?
To be heard?
To be heard. To be hugged, to be held, to be listened to be whatever. Okay, good. Now we have the antidote. Where did the antidote come from? From the client. Why? Because they know themselves better than anybody else. To be heard. Okay, John, so here's the thing. He's been here for 12 minutes, ranting and raving, and I have been hearing him, and the rage is not dissipating. Where do we go from here? Open question. Well, I think what really needs to happen is we need to tell him this and this and this. Whatever the information is that is revealed from the place of the magician, and we access the magician by distancing ourselves physically even from the highly emotional state, the responses, the answers will come. The client will tell you what they need, and then it's your job to make sure that that need is met. Make sense? The magician has all the information you need to allow healing to happen. Yes, Carol?
I just remember you did discuss it briefly, but what if you're doing a Skype or Zoom session and you can't get them to move? Well, how would you deal with it?
You can actually get them to move if they have a headset. You know, however the cable stuff work is. John, hold it just for 1 second. Please stand up out of your chair. Now take a look at the chair where you just sat. Now that John that sat there that was so angry, what does he need? You can. If they can't move, you improvise. So, you know, you might just say, okay, stop for a minute. You might just, even by using the pronoun John as opposed to you start accessing the magician anyway, because you're dissociating from himself, right? So anything along those lines.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. So anytime you pull them out, helps them to access the magician, helps reduce the high levels of emotion, gives us clues and responses as to where to move to next. Ask them what homework they would give themselves. Intellectual question, magician question. They will probably come up with the best homework, better than whatever you could have dreamt up. Now, I call the next one the get a room process. Is you can say, listen, you can use everything in my... Hold on, let me just mute somebody. Okay. You can say you can use anything in my living room or anything in my study. Represent the problem you have for me. Use the objects to represent the problem. Now, it's not going to be possible for me to demonstrate it, but let me give you an example. So I'm sitting by my desk. Let's say they come in and they feel very small. So that, or they feel like they're carrying a whole lot of burden. They might take the pot plant and the printer and the other pot plants and put it all on the table, and then they might go and cower under the table in the corner with a blanket over them. Now we have a physical representation of what the problem feels like, seems like, looks like, and sounds like to them. Good. Now we can start the therapy session. Now we have a physical representation. With tapping, we will simply tap on what is. Even though there's the table, and there's the pot plant, and there's me cowering in the corner with a blanket over me, and I feel like this, and da-da-da-da. If you don't do EFT, you can simply have a coaching conversation. For example, pull the person out of the picture, so we dissociate them, and therefore we access the power of the magician, and say, well, is that how it is? He goes, yeah, that's how it is. I'll say, well, no wonder you've been depressed. I mean, if that was happening in my life, I'd be depressed too. Like, just look at it. Now, there's two purposes for this exercise. The first one is when somebody sees the physical representation of how their life is at the moment, it could be very revealing. They have probably never seen how serious or how difficult it is. They've never noticed it in that way. It also gives us perspective, remember? Then the next phase of that conversation would be what needs to happen here. And that would involve physically moving or removing objects to create the perfect scenario. And then somehow, often by changing the dynamic on the inside, the first thing we do, we take the dynamic that's in the inside, we represent it physically on the outside. Then we get them to change it on the outside, and we get them to imprint it back on the inside, or take it in, or take a snapshot of this picture, or re-imprint it if you're familiar with matrix re-imprinting. And somehow, by changing the dynamic on the outside, we often get changes on the inside. But just, you can do this with pick-up sticks. You don't have to use your furniture. If you have precious Persian carpets, do anything. Pick up sticks. You can use dice. You can use bits of play Lego, anything to get a physical representation of the problem, and then you move on from there. Let them dialogue with internal parts. So, John, if you were to speak to that part of you that is so angry, what would you like to say to him? Or Mary, if you could speak to that part of you that is so sad when people don't look at you, what would she say? Or what would you like to say to her? Notice how the voice changes immediately, right? Talking lover work, my voice immediately goes an octave down, kind, gentle, patient, whatever. Call in wise people. Somebody they respect. People often do the Dalai Lama. It's a great story of somebody who used the Dalai Lama in a matrix re-imprinting session. The adult client wanted the Dalai Lama in the picture. And then when they asked the little girl, she said, "Who's the Dalai Lama?" So it was the adult wanting the Dalai Lama. The child had no idea who the Dalai Lama was. So John, if the Dalai Lama was here today, what would he say to you about all this anger that keeps hurting you? Okay. The response that comes is the wisdom that comes from the magician in the client, and that is much better than any quote we can give him. Matrix re-imprinting, those of you that know that, remember that matrix re-imprinting is suitable even for the most horrific trauma, and the reason it is so is because it uses the power of dissociation, which is the realm of the magician. One of you said earlier when I asked about the reason for procrastination, said that it's risky. Now, Cliff coined this phrase called risk manager, and that's a part of you that sits and observes, and anything that looks dangerous will get you not to do it. So that's a part of you that would procrastinate, that would put off that difficult conversation, that won't start your own business, that won't even print your business cards, that won't promote your material, all that stuff, because it will write your book, or quit your relationship, or change jobs, or whatever it might be, or give that proposal to your boss, because it deems it's not safe. Now again, step them out of themselves. Say, John's been coming here for the last 6 months wanting to start his own business. And we've worked on this, and we've done this, and we've tried that, and still something seems to be stopping John. Tell me about that. Right? Because I'm using the power of the magician, he will start giving me information about his risk manager, which is tappable, coachable, lovable. We need to maybe have a conversation with that part to make it feel safe and resolve the resistance to following their dreams in that way. Remember also that the magician is opposite the lover. So on page 24, if they can't access emotion, it's okay. And we know it's okay because it's happening. It's very simple. And we don't need them to access emotion. Yet, we can use the magician. A magician session is as powerful and as valid as a lover session, right? It's not like we're just trying to get them to cry in every session. It's not like that. If you believe that there's a lot of unexpressed emotion and they're finding it hard to get in touch with it, or they keep saying they're okay, that question at the top of page 24, guess what you would be feeling if you felt anything? Or conversely ask, if you did feel anything, what would you feel? And they'll give you an intellectual answer. Well, I suppose if I did feel anything, I'd feel a lot of grief. Okay, good. And why wouldn't you, given what happened to you? And then you use some of the lover tools to guide them in the direction of that grief. If it had a color, if you could show me a picture of where this started, right? Which picture would you show me? All magician tools to get to the information. We spoke about this already. What did that mean to you? Or what did this mean to you? What does it mean? Trust is a big thing, right? So the risk manager will be constantly on the lookout for any discrepancies Anytime you say something, you don't do it. Every time you're incongruous, every time you don't follow through, and they would stack up the evidence as to why they cannot trust you. That's what risk managers does, or what they do. So your job is be consistent, be honest, be real. Don't pretend or try and bullshit them, right? The magician has a bullshit detector second to none, and will smile you a mile away. Challenge them or help them reframe the meaning they've given events and circumstances. Oh, really? So the fact that she looked at you that way means that you're worthless. Huh, that's interesting, or something like that. And then those of you familiar with EFT, those are the techniques that are also squarely in the magician quarter: movie techniques, sneaking up on the problem, almost healers trauma, the morph technique, which I'll post, and symbols, which we will go into maybe in the bonus call or another time. Let me see if I can do that in 30 seconds or less. So symbols is when no, I can't do it in 30 seconds or less. I'm not going to. Verbosity is clearly one of my strengths. And then at the bottom of page 24, bringing in lover support. So we meet the magician where they're at. It's not just that we allow or tolerate the magician, we use it. It has invaluable information. This is why I love the magician so much. It brings insight and perspective into a client that we will never get with in any other way. And then we might want to bring some balance towards the lover, which is the bottom paragraph there. You meet the magician where they're at, and then you consider the benefits of getting into some lover with some of the lover tools that has been detailed in the lover section. Okay, that concludes the contents. Everybody take a nice deep breath in and stretch the body. I know there is an enormous amount of information. Are there any specific comments or questions about the magician? We have a minute or so. Any other questions that we don't get to, you can always post in the Facebook group. I'd be very happy to answer them.
I'm really interested, and maybe it's a bigger question, around deflated magician and deflated warrior. I see quite a big link in myself around that, around confusion and then stuckness and inaction.
Absolutely. Remember we said earlier that the magician needs to give clear instructions to the warrior about what the warrior needs to do. If the magician is confused, it'll give unclear or no direction to the warrior. The warrior wouldn't know what the hell it's supposed to do. So yeah,
so do you think it's more magician rather than warrior? I mean,
well, it could be. Not necessarily. I think if the magician is deflated, it's going to be very hard to have a balanced warrior because the instructions are missing.
Well,
if you have a balanced magician and the warrior isn't getting into action, I think it's more of a warrior wound, and the warrior is either is deflated because it's uncertain, or it's insecure, or he doesn't want to protect its own boundaries or stuff like that. But I do think there's a chain there that the magician would inform the warrior about what to do, and if that information is dodgy, then the warrior can't be mature and take action in the world when it doesn't know what action it's supposed to be taking. Thank you, Rob. Okay, we're going to call that for now. Any other questions, you're welcome to email me, post it on the forum, whatever. I'd be happy to continue the conversation. We also have the bonus call. I really would have loved a longer checkout, but it's not going to happen with the timing. So let me make 3 quick announcements. The transcriptions are starting to come through. I posted yesterday to everybody that I know of. The first 3 will have the other 2 calls. Well, call 4 is in progress, and I'll send her call 5 today. They're about 30 pages each of the calls. If you don't have them and you want them, message me. You can still get a copy for all 5 for $20 US. The bonus call next week. Please let me know either an email or in the Facebook group what would be most useful to you. For example, you want more practice time. You want to talk about difficult clients and let's brainstorm collectively what needs to happen. You want me to do a demonstration of something, right? What would be most useful? So to help me guide the call in a way that's going to give you the most benefit. And then the last thing is I'm about to make an announcement. Those of you that have not done Fall in Love with Presenting, it is going to blow your little socks off. You're going to think there's a typo in that email, but in fact, you'll find out that it's actually quite accurate. So get your presentation skills boots on. And I'm coming to a few different countries soon with an offer that is just crazy. Part of a new Fall in Love with Presenting version 2 launch, which will be happening in the next few weeks. All right, so it's time for us to check out. There's only 3 minutes left, so I want to be mindful of the time. Please do a short checkout, and then let's do it this way. After the bonus call, we can do a longer checkout on the Facebook group. So a shortish check-in, the checkout, a sentence or less. Let's start with Ellie.
For me, it's just so much more is falling into place this week. It's just like everything started to go. Dunk, 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 dunk. Yeah.
Thanks, Ellie. Thanks, Ellie. Leslie Hardy. Oh, she's gone. Other Leslie.
For me, it's also falling into place a little bit more. And I can see that very much. I have had a life as a deflated warrior, very much.
Fabulous. Sounds like an important insight. Thank you. Shirley.
Yeah, like everyone else said, it's falling into place. It's all making sense.
Yay!
Thank you.
I love it when that happens, Monique. Unmute yourself, please. For some reason, I can't unmute you. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As I said in our group earlier, it's too much to process right now. I just struggle with how to use it, but it'll come.
One thing at a time. One technique at a time. Carol, you're unmuted. Go ahead. Oh, actually, no, I can't unmute you either. I don't know what's going on. Unmute yourself, please.
It's coming together for me, Benny. Thank you.
Yay. John Booth, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Loving the layers.
Thank you for the short checkout. Sharon.
I feel like I'm in free fall. There's like so much, and there's just free falling into this landscape, and it's fabulous. Awesome.
Great. Thank you. Rob, you're unmuted.
Joy to connect with you and everyone in the corners of the world. So Sovereign and my warriors itching to get going with my list of stuff of the day. Something like that.
Sweetness. Thank you. Megan.
Yeah, just loving all the extra tools that I can bring in, especially in some of the places that historically I might have been a bit stuck.
Cool. Thank you. Emmy.
So many insights. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right, we're moving to 3 words or less. Liesel.
I love this.
Can't hear you, Benny.
Theo. No, Theo is frozen. What else?
Benny, insightful and inspiring.
Thank you, Theo. Avenol, 3 words or less. Just unmute yourself. I don't know why Zoom doesn't allow me to unmute some of you.
Fascinating and possibility for enrichment.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Exciting and fascinating.
Thank you, Jane.
Multi-dimensional.
Barb.
Thank you, Benny.
Robin.
Wondering and noticing.
All right, everybody please unmute yourselves. And then as we are familiar now, on the count of 3, we'll all check out with, let's say, with a blessing for somebody else or for everybody else. You wish them peace or happiness or love or lots of sex or money or whatever. 1, 2, 3. Wishing you all well.
Wishing you
infinite joy, clarity,
blessings.
Thank you. Please
prosperity to all.
Post on the group whatever you'd like from the bonus call, and then we'll have a ball next week. Bye for now. Lots of love.
Bye.
Thank you, Benny.
Ciao, ciao.